For our GMS focus topic this morning, we wanted to cover in detail one of the major headlines, Seoul-Tokyo relations and what's at stake. President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol recently held a phone conversation with his Japanese counterpart, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. It is said that the two leaders agreed to cooperate on improving bilateral ties. Now, for groundwork, the South Korean delegation is now in Japan to work on the tangled, thorny Seoul-Tokyo relations. But with fundamentally distant positions on historical disputes, where do we really go from here? For some insight, we connect with Professor Kim Byung-Joo from the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
All right, let's begin. President-elect Yoon's Korea-Japan policy consultation team arrived in Japan yesterday. What do you see in the group's composition and missions? They also have a meeting scheduled with Japan's foreign minister. What do you suppose can we expect of its outcome?
The group is headed by the vice chair of the National Assembly, Jung Jin-suk, Korea politician and pretty much a heavyweight. And he's assisted by his deputy lawmaker from People Power Party, Kim Seok-ki. He's the second head of the Korea-Japan Lawmakers Caucus. And so these are politicians, relatively heavyweight politicians who have been engaged in Japan-Korea exchange among the political leaders so far. And they are leading not a small delegation here. The delegation includes the experts who have been dealing with Japan-Korea issues in academia and policymaking, including some of the former Foreign Affairs Ministry officials here in Korea who have dealt with Japan-Korea negotiations, for instance, 2015 agreement in the process of coming up with the agreement. Some of these people were closely engaged in the process. And they also even include, the foreign affairs experts who have been dealing with U.S. issues and so on. So the composition itself indicates that this delegation is quite serious about talking about specific issues between Korea and Japan, and also talking about this bilateral relationship between Seoul and Tokyo in the context of trilateral cooperation that includes Washington as well. And this visit, which will take 5 days altogether, including yesterday's arrival, this is important because, Yoon's Presidential Transition Committee or Yoon's team has had a special delegation to Washington immediately after the team was set up, after the election victory. But this is the second such delegation overseas. So it highlights the priority of Yoon government's foreign policy. The team will be meeting with key figures in the Japanese foreign ministry and the various ministries and the government agencies, and they will have, of course, more than anything, close dialogue with the leadership of the Diet, Japanese legislature, and also they'll have a broad scope interaction with the leadership of Japanese business community and media and academia, and so on. And obviously, they'll be talking about restoring the bilateral relationship that has been seriously damaged for the past several years, and then talking about the strengthening cooperation in dealing with North Korea, and also lastly, as I mentioned, the trilateral cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. I think those are the agenda list.
It's a hefty amount of groundwork to be done in a total of 5 days, as you mentioned. But one of the sticking points that we mentioned in the headline is that the Korean delegation is expected to meet with the Prime Minister of Japan, as well as his predecessor, including but not limited to former Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga. What do you think will come out of those meetings particularly, and will they extend President-elect Yoon's invitation from Prime Minister Kishida to attend his upcoming inauguration?
Yeah, I guess that invitation will be a key issue, perhaps. The observers and the publics on both sides, Japan and Korea are closely watching as a key outcome for this meeting. I guess around the time of the arrival of this delegation in Japan, the news broke out saying that Kishida Fumio, Prime Minister, is going to meet with this delegation. And I don't think it's 100% confirmed, but I think we've been hearing the reports that Prime Minister Kishida Fumio is going to meet with the delegation, and many hope that this will be materialized. The situation is because even inside Japan, we are familiar with the hardliners within LDP, Japanese ruling party, that maintained a hawkish attitude towards Korea. And some of the key leadership of this conservative faction within LDP have been outspokenly expressing their opposition to the idea of Prime Minister Kishida Fumio meeting with this delegation. Some of these leaders were saying, delegation is coming and they should meet with the vice minister level people here in Japan, basically indicating that Korea owes to Japan in many ways in terms of the worsening of the relationship, and this delegation as the first gesture of Yoon government, which will have to deliver a lot more to Tokyo in their own conservative views. Right. This delegation should not be treated as highly, but that has been the words, and there have been significant opposition to it. But if indeed decision has been made that Prime Minister Kishida Fumio is going to be meeting with the delegation, it will be something very much of a forthcoming gesture on the side of the other segment or the other faction of LDP and Japanese government who actually want to see improvement of the bilateral relationship. So it will be a good gesture. And when he meets with the delegation, expectation is they will be talking about President-Yoon's invitation of the Prime Minister to come and join his inauguration. As we look back, it's interesting that we forget that the thing is, until Moon Jae-in government, usually Japanese prime ministers have attended Korean president's inauguration. That's an interesting reminder how close the two countries had been before. Lee Myung-bak's inauguration, Fukuda Yasuo prime minister came to join his inauguration. Nomuyen's inauguration, Koizumi Junichiro actually came the prime minister at that time. And actually, during Lee Myung-bak administration, there was a Dokdo issue that emerged, and then Japan got really angry about it. So as a result of it, when Park Geun-hye inaugurated, not prime minister, but still vice prime minister, Aso Taro, who used to serve as a prime minister, also came, despite the tension between the two countries, to attend her inauguration as well. So we are being reminded that the Japanese prime minister's participation in Korean inauguration has been a long-held tradition that has been recently interrupted.
There are, of course, at the heart of the disputes, many fundamentally distant positions between Korea and Japan, namely historical and territorial disputes. The Dokdo question reemerged a few days before this Korean delegation's departure for Japan. How should we currently understand the situation, Professor Kim?
Yeah, the Dokdo question has been with us for the last 30 years, I guess 30, 40 years altogether here. And I think those people who are hopeful for the improvement of the bilateral relationship tend to note the timing of this blue book, Japanese diplomatic blue books issue came out last Friday before the visit of delegation. So the understanding is that Japan has to do this in terms of what has been required by the general government policy, and they wanted to get this out of their way as quickly as possible before the delegation comes. If it had come, it was going to be coming after the delegation's visit. It could actually wreck the overall trend of improvement afterwards. So they just had to put it out Friday in a hurry before delegation arrives in Japan, and then get it out of the way, and from there on, possibly Kishida government wants to work on improving the relationship between the two as a whole. I mean, the blue books mentioning of Dokdo is same as it has been for the last 5 years. So of course, Korean government protested and everything. So it was same old ritual that both sides went through. But the way I see it and the way many experts see it, the timing of its issuing is something that kind of reflected just Kishida government's care to try to make better outcome out of this delegation's visit. I guess that's kind of wishful thinking, one could say, but that's my observation.
And perhaps a different approach to the same tug-of-war that's been unfolding. Yeah. Here's another point of controversy. The Yasukuni Shrine visit by former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and others this past week also stirred up much pretty loud reaction in South Korea, of course. How should Korea deal with this sticky issue?
Yeah, another issue that has been around for a long time, several decades, I guess 4 decades, as I remember. And last Thursday, the former Prime Minister Abe visited the Yasukuni Shrine here. And I guess in his words this time, we are being reminded how Japanese right-wing think. In dealing with Japan-Korea relations, I think what we have to keep in mind is that just like us, both countries, Korea and Japan, these two countries are deeply divided within themselves about the issue of Seoul-Tokyo ties. In Korea, there are a lot of people who want to see improvement between the two countries, and at the same time, we also have many of us who are very emotional about the past history and territorial issues about the two countries, and not necessarily putting the improvement of the bilateral ties on the top of agenda. Rather, they like to see the historical and the territorial issues being resolved first, and want to see Japan apologize and make their moves first. So the Korea is divided. Same thing on Japan. And I think Abe's comment at Yasukuni reminded us how Japanese right-wing thinks. What he said was the war, he indicated in his words, I cannot copy exactly his words, but he indicated that the Japanese imperial war was something about Japan fighting against imperialists from the West, and these people who kept in Yasukuni Shrine are the ones who are trying to defend Japanese people, Japanese territory, fighting against hostile forces coming in from overseas. He mentioned Ukraine in his words, and saying Ukraine reminded us of the sacrifices of our ancestors and so on. So we were just being reminded how the right-wing Japanese think, and then their thinking, of course, gets in the way of the improving relationship between the two countries. The reason why I'm saying this is that we have to be at the same time being reminded there are other Japanese who feel terrible about the war experience and deeply apologetic about what Japan has done to neighboring countries. We are not talking about one Japan. It's divided Japan, just like divided Korea about Japan-Korea issues. So we should try to understand how right-wing people are thinking, not necessarily, with agreeing with them. And at the same time, we have to focus on improving our relationship with the other side of the Japanese who feel negative, who feel different about their war memories and so on. That's a better way of improving the relationship. So that's why the Yasukuni Shrine comments by Abe was important for us.
So it's not necessarily to condone it, but to better understand these different spectrum of not just politicians, but the public's view of the same issue as well. Maybe the end goal that we want could be similar. The approach may be different. I actually came across this opinion piece this morning that I thought was really interesting. It was, I believe, on the Korea Herald. It compared what happened with Nazi Germany to the apologies that's being requested out of Japan. What the opinion piece said was Germany offering apologies and compensation to victimized countries made possible due to Europe's roots in Christianity that puts emphasis on a sinner realizing his sin, confessing, repenting, being forgiven, and so on forth. What it goes on to say is that maybe Japan's cultural bias, maybe, I say this really carefully, is far from Christianity in Europe. And this true apology that South Korea is requesting based on reconciliation, is it even fundamentally possible? I just thought it was a different angle to the same issue.
I think that's an interesting insight right there. And what I've been hearing from my friends, very close friends, my personal friends in Japan, is that many of them who tend to maintain neutral or pro-Korea positions on their side have been mentioned. I'm just copying their words here, not my personal interpretation. I'm just completely quoting them. And they said, many Japanese feel that they've been apologizing for the last several decades all the time, continuously, with different degree of seriousness. And there have been some really, really, really serious apologies offered by the top leadership. But they think Koreans did not accept that, and they continue to ask us to apologize. How long should we apologize, and how long should this go on? Of course, Korea's position is until the victims feel satisfied.
Right.
And Japanese friends say, how do we know when they will be satisfied, and what we exactly have to do to make them really satisfied? My Japanese friends say, isn't this goalpost kept on moving here? And of course, I have to criticize, counter their arguments. But you know, they make these points, and this is the point that Japanese people seem to have in their minds in trying to make the relationship better between the two countries.
So what we want to do this morning for our listeners is to raise all these different perspectives and see going forward then what might be the best way for the incoming Yoon administration to put its best foot forward in repairing Korea-Japan relations. I'm not even sure if I can call them forecasts, but what do you see ahead for the incoming Yoon government's efforts?
Right. I think the Yoon government will be serious about repairing the relationship, especially in the context of Korea, Japan, and U.S. trilateral cooperation, because this is a critical issue for national defense, facing threats from North Korea and the relationship with China and so on. So this will be a top of their agenda for sure. And that's my forecast. And in doing so, I just want to repeat briefly what I said before. In dealing with Japan, I think Korea as a whole, Korean government and public, should be aware that Japan is not one Japan we are dealing with in regard to these bilateral issues. And we should do all we can, to help those Japanese who want to improve relationship with Korea. No, differentiate these people who oppose Korea and critical of Korea and who say these things that we cannot agree with about the past and territory issues. Set them aside, but we should do our best to help the other people who want to a better relationship with Korea to speak up and then strengthening their position in Korea. We know Japanese people like Korean dramas, K-pop, K culture, and they love visiting Korea and Korean food and so on. And Koreans also love to visit Japan as their top destination for tourism and so on. These kind of things, people who want to get along with the other side, they need to be encouraged, continues to be encouraged. I think that should be the focus going forward.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for some deep insights. Have a safe day, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.